Hello, truth seekers. Welcome to Combat Ufology with Argo. I'm your host, Ghost Lee Hunter, with host and abductee ufologist Argo, who has studied and investigated abductee ufology since the age of 13. With over 40 years of research, Argo carries the torch of truth about abductee ufology. A former combat veteran of the Gulf War, Argo reverse engineers misinformation, separating the truth from lies among the community of ufology. Tonight we will be covering Pillar Number 1, the Betty and Barney Hill Abduction, Part 1 of a 7-pillar series laying an educational foundation for abductee ufology. Operation 7 Pillars begins now.
So my pillar system is derived from like 7 or 8 different scientists that are abductee scientists. They are civilian all the way to academics, artists, and various and sundry different lifestyles that these incredible people have had over the past 70 years or so working in this. And tonight is I've developed a system where we can use all of these people's prior work, nothing of my own, but we can use all these people's prior work to understand what's really going on in ufology, real ufology, and what's really transpired in real ufology.
So take us through this Betty and Barney Hill abduction here and how all this began.
Okay, so Betty and Barney are coming back from a trip. It's September 19th, literally my birthday, 1961, which I wasn't born in 61. I was born after that, but 1961, and they're coming back through the White Mountains or the Adirondacks. I can't remember what they were, but either way, they're coming back from a trip, and Betty's looking out the window as you do, driving along at night, and she sees a star, a very bright star, and she yells to Barney, Barney, look, and she says in her own words that she thought maybe she had found a new star because it was so bright, and it disturbed them so much that they decided to pull over and take a look.
So what happened then?
So they pull over to the side of the road. Barney gets out, grabs his binos, steps out into beside the road somewhere in the little field, and he's observing this craft as it's kind of slowly coming towards him, and he can see that there's occupants in it, and it sends him into a panic. And the strange thing is that he came back to the car, running back to the car, saying, I can't let them capture us. I can't let them capture us. So they jump in the car and they go speeding down the road away from this thing as he's saying, I can't let them capture us. I can't let them capture us.
So what was the process or the method that these extraterrestrials, or that's what we'll call them for now, used to capture
Okay.
Betty and Barney? What kind of method did they use?
So it's a method that's used all the time on abductees. It's all riddled throughout abductee lore. The craft starts flying up on them, and they begin to hear, I think, a buzzing noise. And then Barney gets a strange command, and that is that he needs to take a right at this next road. And when you hear Barney under regression, his comment to being made to take this right is he says, literally, I don't know why I had to take that right. So this is one of the things we can stop now and understand about this case and abductee ufology in general, because it works the same across the board, across the planet. And that is that obviously Barney had been abducted before because he received an autonomous command to take a right. And in the end, he drove them right up on the site where they were recovered at. So one of the things we have to glean about this is that if you have been shipped or implanted they can subvert your will to go opposing to what you want to do. Barney probably knew he shouldn't take that right, but he did take that right because he had to.
Now, does that mean he was under mind control at this point?
Well, you would have to say at least mildly he was under mind control, because although he's probably reciting how scared he was and was still in the car and lucid and driving, he also received a command to turn right, and he followed it.
So, when this happens and they make this turn, and I guess the car comes to a stop, how do they go from the car on board the ship?
It's a great question. So Barney takes the right, and they travel on it for a bit, come up and over a rise. And here's the UFO right there, either in the road or right off to the side of the road. And there's 3 dismounted aliens standing in the road. 2 of them, Betty says that 2 of them came for her, and she can't really tell, well, she doesn't really say whether the other one went for Barney, but it seems rather obvious that that one went for Barney. Now, here I can interject a little bit of my own thought about this. Let's say we already know that Barney fell victim to the mind control to bring them to this ambush point. So it's apparent that Barney was already an abductee at this point. But it is not apparent whether or not Betty was an abductee at this point. So the 2 that were probably dealing with her, they probably had to better control her. Whereas Barney is already part of the program. He's already been chipped. He's already received an autonomous command to turn right here. So he's probably easily controlled and is made to walk himself on board. Whereas Betty's pretty much escorted by 2 of them, is my guess.
Did Betty fight them?
She does what every other person who is approached by Gray does. They willingly comply to whatever the Gray wants you to do.
Talking about a shock factor, seeing something like that or being a part of something like that, you really wouldn't know what to do.
Well, they mute that part of your mind. They completely round off and dull off those sharp edges of your mind: fear, panic, terror, elation, joy, pain. They 2 things that have a tendency to shock a abductee out of this compliant state can be fear or pain. So those are the 2 things that they try to control immensely. Because if they can control your fear or pain, then they have control of you.
So when they got on board the craft or were taken aboard, what was some of the things they experienced while they were on board the craft?
Horror. Horror pretty much is what they experienced. So Barney was taken in naked, put on a slab. He had a small probe inserted in his anus. That piece of information comes from Kathleen Martin, who is their niece, is Betty Hill's niece. And then a cup device, which is very common. A cup device with a hose on it is attached to his genitals, and sperm is taken. Meanwhile, in the other room, Betty's having a little different experience. She's at one point she's shown a big long needle, and the little doctor, as she calls him, says he wants to put it in her navel. And he said that it won't hurt. And she said she doesn't want it, and he does it anyway. And as she's reliving it under hypnosis, she says, it hurts, it hurts, it hurts. And they come over, a Gray comes over and basically nulls the pain away. And that's them getting close enough to be able to neurally use their mind to block out the pain. Some time later, there was a book. It's called The Interrupted Journey and 2 Hours Aboard a Spacecraft, the 2 Missing Hours Aboard a Spaceship. And it was written by John G. Fuller. And So yeah, that's the what happened. That's how their book came out. But meanwhile, back on board the ship, Betty wants to take an item, and she's not allowed to take an item. And she says to them, probably in her best Bostonian accent in her mind, she says to them, "You fellas aren't from around here, are you? Where are you from?" And the little doctor produces a 3D star map saying, "You won't recognize the names of these stars that we have, but we're from right here." And on the map, there were lines that were solid black and dashed black. And the lines from the Orion Belt stars to us were all solid black. And then the ones leading away from us, because it kind of made a V shape, if I remember right. And we were at the bottom of the V, and then away to the right side of the V in a big bow was dashed lines. And she asked him, "What are those lines on the map?" And the little doctor gave us one of the best pieces of information we could have had about that map, because he said that the black lines were lines of exploration and the dashed lines were lines of expedition. And we all know, because the British did it for many years in Africa and South America, that you always send an expedition first. Small expedition, to scout inside, to see what's there, to see whether it's worth exploration. Shortly after she's shown this map, they're both put back into their vehicles, which they don't remember. They're both made to reclothe, which they don't remember. Then they're both made to get in their vehicle and obviously leave this right that Barney took and get back on the main road, and they come to back on the road 2 hours later.
Wow. How does Benjamin Simon figure into all this?
So in the weeks after the event, both of them were going through a lot of trauma, a lot of your subconscious knows everything that happens to you. And these little gray bastards hide this trauma behind either fake memories, or they try to screen them off to where you can't actively think about them. They can't have you remembering things. They can't have the human race knowing. So, over the coming few weeks, Barney had developed an ulcer, incredibly bad. And I'm sure that's from stress, right? And
Mm-hmm.
Betty had an entire week of bad nightmares about this abduction. And basically, at the end of a week of nightmares, she knew most of what had happened. Her mind had leaked out, her subconscious, while it was accessed while she was in REM sleep, accessed what actually happened to her and started showing her. So she was having these nightmares about what actually happened. Barney eventually went to a man named Dr. Benjamin Simon. Man, a man deserving of the first pillar. Same with Betty and Barney Hill. Deserving of the first pillar. And here's why. The man had been working with World War II vets who had seen the beaches of Normandy and Okinawa and, you know, terrible places where men were slaughtered. And these men had had, a terrible time living their lives. They didn't have the things that we have today, post-traumatic stress disorder understanding and all that other stuff, psychoactive drugs that actually did something instead of turning you into a vegetable. Like, they didn't really have that. But they had a tool that the magical arts down through thousands of years has passed to us called hypnosis. And he'd been having success by men who had blocked memories of things that had happened so they could deal with the trauma with something called regression hypnosis. And all that really means is the general idea of what a personality thinks hypnosis is about. It's to retrieve something that happened or some memory very clearly, and that's exactly what it does. You basically are it plays on your mind. Hypnosis does, and it tricks your mind into opening the subconscious of a person. A person can open their eyes, they can take a drink of water, they can ask questions, they can answer questions, all of these things. The difference is when they're asked, when they're in this regressive state, when they're asked to relive a memory, that is exactly what happens. They literally can, with closed eyes, live every single second of what actually happened. And Dr. Simon thought it might be good that he could tell that they had both gone through some kind of trauma. Didn't know what it was, didn't believe it was aliens, just knew it was some kind of trauma. And he had a tool that he could use to find out. What he found out is that Betty and Barney Hill had been ushered off a side road, taken by beings aboard a craft, subjected to medical experiments. She was shown a map that 8 or 9 years later, about the year I was born, 69, another woman found in the cosmos from her drawing.
Wow.
So what do we draw for the pillar system? Where does Benjamin Simon and Betty and Barney Hill fit? Well, they are both on top of the pillar as a conglomerate group, along with John G. Fuller's book about their experience. And the main thing that everybody needs to do is they need to go and buy that book. You need to read that book. The main thing that we learn from the Betty and Barney Hill case and Dr. Benjamin Simon's regression of them and the book by John G. Fuller is this. The main thing that we have to thank Dr. Benjamin Simon for is that he used a post-war psychological tool that was helping traumatized soldiers to remember what really happened in their instances and use that tool to show that one, aliens lie. Two, aliens cover their lies with a blank smeared spot that you can't remember through, although it's still there. And three, we learned that regression is the only tool mankind has to communicate with a real abductee, having real abduction experiences, and be able to delineate what is truth from fiction. So for that, I commend both Betty and Barney Hill and their memory, and Dr. Benjamin Simon and his memory, and that great case for giving us the one tool that would be used by others later to discern much more about what's actually happening between the transpiring of information between humans and the alien species.
Now the regression technique that Benjamin Simon came up with or used, it seems like these aliens are able to do the same thing, but in a different way. If that makes sense, they're able
Yeah.
to take their victims to that state, but it's much more involved to the point where they put the blocks in and they basically can make them basically create a situation that looks like it had happened to them, but it actually had. You know what I'm saying? Like false
Like it
memories.
has.
Yes.
Yeah. So they didn't do. They. I don't. I don't really know, to tell the truth, whether or not they put any false memories in Betty and Barney's minds. But I know that they masked their memory of what happened. We don't know how they do it. It's an absolute, actual Jason Friday the 13th actual nightmare that their greatest weapon against us is their ability to completely manipulate and dominate the human mind.
For Benjamin Simon to be able to break down those barriers and to penetrate into that and that veil that they put up, that's just amazing.
Can you imagine being him? He was a rather well known doctor, and so he gets this case. He doesn't believe in aliens. He just had no experience with them.
No.
And can you imagine over the months that he worked with them and those horrifying tapes where during under hypnosis you hear Barney screaming. You hear a grown man who was in World War II screaming like a terrified animal going to be slaughtered. It's horrible. It's horrible.
And when they went through that, and in that time frame, there was a lot of ridicule about aliens,
Oh yeah.
and that was pushed under the rug. You
The
know,
government, it's my estimation, the government probably had 10,000 people at the time under employment to smash out UFO stories and abductees. Like the government was so active in trolling this whole subject back then.
it's amazing that regression can take you down roads that you would never think possible.
So let me show you one of Betty Hill's impressions that still lasted to her throughout, I think, the rest of her life. So you can hear Betty say that no, they had big heads and they had large eyes, but she'll also say that everyone she dealt with was human of some sort. Well, we know through thousands of other accounts and decades more that it just probably wasn't actually true. They were probably actually grays. And it's very common for a gray to cast an image in your head of what would be appeasing or okay for you to see. Absolutely commonplace.
So if that's true, then we may not actually know what the grays actually even look like, because they could be putting that image in their head as well. So,
Well, using those rules, you're right, but too many people have seen the Greys a billion times beside their bed or this and that. We know that that's what they do. It's the rare times that we've caught them masking what they look like, that we now understand that they may and can disguise what they look like to you. And can you imagine that? One of them is inside your damn dome, and you think you're seeing a deer stand there. That's not really a deer. That's actually a little gray being, but you have no clue because the only thing you can see is deer.
well, there's been a lot of accounts connected with owls, and there's a guy that's even wrote books about
Yes.
owls, seeing these owls, but then the UFOs or the aliens are also associated with these owls.
So the so as far as being associated to owls, like to an actual creature, that's not really a thing, but it is part of the phenomenon, and that is that many abductees will have a dreams of an owl. They'll think it's a dream of an owl, or they think that they have an owl that always sits outside their windows and it's got great big eyes. And you can ask abductees even sometimes, does the owl talk to you? And they'll say, yeah, the owl tells me to come outside. Well, how many owls do you know that land in the middle of the night when they're hunting to sit outside your window with extra big eyes and tell you to come outside? What that is, that's a mask memory. That's
Yes.
a masking. That's the gray masking itself and already inside your head because it's making you see an owl, or your mind transfers it to see an owl, and it allows that. It enforces that and tells you to come outside. And why come outside? Because we need to capture you and take you aboard for just about 10 or 20 minutes. All you need to do is lay down, which is the number one command on board a UFO. I figure for human beings, the number one and number two commands, just like military structure, is going to be lay down and get up.
Can can we kind of go back and talk about this ambush where they came in and made Barney take a right hand turn, and they kind of set up that scenario? Do you think that Betty and Barney Hill was just at a point on the road or the highway going through the mountains that was secluded enough that they knew that they had their window of opportunity to get them on board the craft? Is that
Yeah, so that's probably exactly what happened. So there are other cases like where a son and a father are going down the road on a freeway, The father receives the command that he's to get off on this exit, take a right, go down 4 miles, and take a right on this dirt road. Sure enough, when they do, they go down there and they get abducted. So that's just like Barney Hill. They're inside his head already. They told him where to go because they probably already prepped the spot. They already know that this spot is good, and they have to set it on the road on the run because they were in a car. So this is the same thing that happened with Betty and Barney Hill. We know that Barney was absolutely an abductee before this point because he was able to receive the mental command. So it may be that Betty was not an abductee. It may be that Barney was the only true abductee.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It makes sense. Barney had the chip and she didn't.
Yeah.
Barney
Yep.
had the hardware and the tech within him.
Yep.
Um,
Sadly, yeah.
you know, there was during the interview, the lost interview of Betty and Betty Hill. She talked about talking to him and that they were nice, but then she also talked about fighting with them.
Yeah.
So did
Yeah.
she fight with them at first and then come to the conclusion that, well, maybe this isn't so bad? Is that how it was kind of presented?
So it's her. It's so she's dealing with the memories that were retrieved by Dr. Benjamin Simon. Okay.
Okay.
And although I know that a person can have perfect recall in another pillar case that we're going to study next time, in pillar number 2 with Raymond E. Fowler, and another abductee, that they can hide something inside someone's mind behind a wall of pain. There was a woman that we're going to deal with in the next pillar who was taken to, quote, see the one. Can you imagine?
See the one.
You're going to see the one. So Ray Fowler and 2 other psychologists pry into her brain, trying to get this experience out. And the aliens had realized this and had set a wall of intense pain there in that spot for her. And you're going to have to find out what happens when we deal with pillar number 2.
Now, Dr. Benjamin Simon's technique for regression. This was this a pretty new thing at the time, or has regression been happening for a long time?
That is actually, I'm glad you asked that question, actually. So the regression, the regression hypnosis was a fairly new tool, actually, for them back then, and it was something that I think that the science knew, but really never employed because it never really had a reason to. It never had an experiment to use the tool on, and so when you have hundreds of thousands of GIs coming back from all of this trauma, well, suddenly you're over flooded with guys that you can use it on, and because they had found success with this tool in allowing men who were like, let's say, we're in a foxhole and a grenade come in, and I don't remember what happened after that. I remember waking up in the hospital, and regression comes to get the man to understand that he does know exactly what happened. Under regression, he recounts that the grenade landed in the foxhole. It blew up. It killed 3 of them. He was traumatized by it. It was gory and nasty, but he actually dragged him and his buddy 150 yards full of holes out of this foxhole, called for a medic, got a medic, was still awake, and took water and everything else until he was medevac, but he remembers none of it because of the trauma. But with regression and being able to kind of separate someone from their body during that experience as they're living it in high def and stop time even, they were able to get the man to, let himself remember. And so he thought this tool might be something that could help them. We now know that after regression has been used, millions of times, hundreds of thousands of times, I'll say confidently, on thousands of different abductees. We now know the patterns. We now know what they do, how they do. We now know that The mind control of Barney was typical, was no fantastic feat. We now know that the examinations by them were absolutely commonplace. They're commonplace. The really only fantastical thing that happened is that she was shown this star map.
And at a time when was it Zeta Reticuli that was on the map that hadn't even been discovered yet? Is that
Hadn't even been discovered. A female astrophysicist or I don't know, whatever she is. People that sit in telescopes and ruin their eyes, look at a billion years into the past or whatever. She 9 years later, taking the star map, the handwritten star map that Betty had drawn, spent years looking for this, but in 1969 she identified what we know as the Zeta Reticuli system that we've named, which is just to say the Orion Belt stars, really is what they are. So that's why Betty and Barney Hill and Dr. Benjamin Simon and the book by John G. Fuller constitute pillar number one. Because we learned that mind control is the modus operandi. We learned that lying is their plan of action. That mankind or sweet little human beings like little sweet Betty Hill still had to be obfuscated in a lie, so much that she had terrible nightmares about them. And that's what these things do. They lie. Because the number one rule is mankind can't know. So that's why the pillar system is dedicated to them. The first pillar is dedicated to them because we have to start at the beginning of where the line of truth follows, and that starts with them. Because we were given the tool, the only tool that we delineate the truth with, and that's regression hypnosis.
fantastic?
Other than that, I would tell people that they need to read the book. That's what these pillar shows are about. I'm going to give you a rough rundown of what each pillar is, the books that you need to read to form your own understanding of the ideals I give you, so that as you follow along by pillar system number 7, you may have spent $150 on books, but you now can open up YouTube and you can absolutely go trash, 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 trash. Wow, that may have something that I want to see. Trash, 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 because it's all trash. And I can tell you that these trash monsters who are ruining ufology, who are sinking the real evidence out of existence, are nothing but money seekers. They want you to come to their lectures. They want you to come to their concert halls. They want you to entertain them at dinners for $150. They want you to buy their documentaries and read their books of ignorance.
What about
The only book
going on tour to these ancient sites and cruises and all that?
That's right. Yeah, cruise. Can you imagine? Yeah. Come and see me. I'm Giuseppe Udorki, and I've been in this business telling lies and whatever the public wants to hear for 30 years. Come join us. You're going to learn something.
And do you think this is part of the program, or do you think that it's just about the money, basically?
It's just, no one wants to hear this dark truth because it is a dark truth. So what you do is, if you're a little conniving piece of crud, you take a little bit of the lore and then you switch it all around. We got 50 different aliens. They're all buddies. They all have us under their thumb. No one's telling us anything. It's just a big exploitation of the entire human race for whatever reason by 50 other races for 10 billion years. That's a bunch of crap. That's a bunch of crap. That's people who every day post a video and get 30,000 views, baby. Or they post a video every 2 days and they get 5,000 views. A sycophant doesn't care who's following them, just that people are following. A sycophant doesn't care what he tells you, truth or lie. But if the lie is more fantastical and garners more of your attention, that's what you're getting.
And the more they tell a lie, the more people believe it.
Yep, that's right. The more that other people then base a channel on that lie and on this myth and on that crap, people don't understand.
You,
The truth is not out there anymore.
well, I know that from communication with you and talking to you that you have basically been looking at the internet since the beginning of the internet.
I did a lot of work at the beginning of the internet and then gave it up for many years. But I remember, like you said the other day on that show, there were evidences that a person used to be able to see on the internet in certain places that were shocking.
I've seen some
And
really good stuff, and and here's where I'm going with it. Because we have that background and we have seen that footage and all that stuff that we had seen back then up until
yep,
present day, we were able to learn from all the things that we had seen how to sift through the junk. And there's
yep,
tons of junk out there, and I even get fooled every once in a while now, but I go back and look and usually figure it out. But um,
right.
the evidence that was out way back then, it was a lot better, I think, and it was a lot of it. It's sad that a lot of it has been taken down and it's been taken away. It has been taken away from us.
Well, me and you have discussed a particular video of a creature that was found by a couple of boys, a couple of hillbillies, and that can no longer be seen. It's gone. Like
Yeah,
I put it in a folder so that it would never go anywhere, so I could pull it up and show people that amazing video, and it's gone.
and it was extracted off your computer and gone.
Well, it's just the file is there, where I'd save that video. The file is there, and then the video, little white video, no longer can display this video thing is sitting there where it would have been, but it's gone. So it doesn't even have a name for it or anything. And of course, I didn't download anything. I'm not an internet tech guru or nothing like that. I've spent most of my life trying to read up on this subject from all the greatest people who've ever lived to know anything about ufology, and at the same time try and garner relationships with actual abductees in the world.
And it's very important that people get this side of the story, because this side of the story is paints a totally different picture of what they're selling out there in the main hub today.
Yeah. Yeah, just ask yourself if you're listening to this program, just if you have a YouTube account, open your YouTube account, start looking through your favorite pages that you watch about this subject or anywhere, look up new ones. Type in Abductee Ufology and you'll probably find nothing but trash because it's not here anymore. And that's because it's the truth. The truth is not going to survive out there because the truth will help set people free. And you can't set people free in any society, in any country on this planet today, because those who have economic slavery in hand are nary going to release that. And if you educate the people about what's actually happened, those people might be seen as enemies of humanity or something.
Mm, yeah,
Just like keeping this subject away from humanity right now is a crime against humanity.
absolutely.
But all of those horror stories are yet to come to the other pillar systems. So
Awesome. Well,
that's pretty much all I have to say about Betty Hill's case and Barney Hill's case, Dr. Benjamin Simon. All the information's out there. I've given you everything that a person would need to start their trail of the truth.
okay. Before we go, Argo, is there any way we can tell them some names of books?
So you mean The Interrupted Journey
The
by
Interrupted
John
Journey.
G. Fuller?
Yeah,
Yep, by
that's.
John G. Fuller. And it's was written in like 63 or 65.
Mm-hmm.
And Betty and Barney Hill collaborated with that book, so it's their official account of what happened.
And the Interrupted Journey, folks. That's one to check out. And
Yep. I don't want to give them any more of the pillar books because they need to get those in the coming pillars.
Okay. That's
Yep.
good. But
I love all you people out there. Listen, this is a curse for me. I've done this all my life, and I used to be optimistic. I used to be optimistic. I used to wonder how they used to fit in with my religion or with my God. And I tell you, there's nothing good in this, but it is the truth. And the truth, I guess, is always good.
I really enjoyed this, and try to get those books, folks, and check them out, and try to stay along with us on this journey, because where we're heading with this is just going to be incredible. You guys
Awesome.
are going to learn some things that you're not going to hear anywhere else. So,
That's for sure.
you want to tell everybody good night, Argo, and we will catch them on the other side.
And everybody be good students and do your diligence. Learn the truth.
Awesome. From Combat Ufology with Argo, this is Ghost Lee Hunter and host Argo. See you on the other side.